Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about how Congress and the Supreme Court can actually check the president. Last time, I basically said, here's all the things the presidents can do. They can do this, and that. But now we're going to see that there is a check on their power. Obviously, there is with checks and balances. I'm going to explain those specific ones right now. So, when it comes to their limits, president can't do everything they want to, especially without Congress, because Congress needs to approve a lot of the things the president wants. First of all, they're the ones that have to pass the laws through them, and they're the ones that have what's known as the power of the purse, meaning they have the money and they get to decide how that money is spent. So if the president has a pet project that they want money spent on, they got to ask Congress to do it. They're also the ones that confirm any major appointments that the president has, whether it's an ambassador, a cabinet member, federal judges, Supreme Court justice. They have to approve that. If they get a treaty signed with another country, the Senate has to approve that. And if the president sees a bill that he doesn't like and vetoes it, Congress can override that veto. So they do limit the president's power in that way. Now, how can the judicial branch overrule that? If he ever creates an executive order where he makes it, remember, it's like has the power of law, but without Congress, they can override that with judicial review. So here is a table of all the presidential powers and then the ways the powers of Congress can kind of override that. You can look at that on your own later. So one of the controversial ones, powers that the president had, and it really was seen with this with Vietnam, was the Wars Powers Resolution with the president being commander in chief, and with Vietnam just being so nasty. They really felt like the president was overstepping his boundaries because he wasn't asking Congress for permission and just sending troops anywhere he wanted. So this law basically said that if a president's going to send troops anywhere, he has to let Congress know within 48 hours of sending troops anywhere before he actually does it. And after he's done that, if within 60 days of the deployment, Congress doesn't want it to happen anymore, they can take back those troops at any time. So they gave it to Nixon. So obviously, any president is going to look at a bill that says, hey, we're taking some of your powers away, and veto it. They're not going to be okay with it. But this was one of those times when Congress was able to override it with a 2/3 vote. Has it ever really been used? No, not really. It's really been ignored because, number one, we haven't seen something on the scale of Vietnam. Number two, it's really hard for Congress to step in after 60 days and be like, okay, we're taking the troops out if an objective hasn't been reached in the areas where troops have been sent. The probably number one power that Congress has is the power of impeachment. Now, this is to be impeached means like you're charged with a crime. It's not, and then you actually get a trial for it. So this is how the president and actually members of the judiciary can be removed from office. The House of Representatives has to have articles of impeachment, which are just charges brought against the president for treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors. And if the majority of the House of Representatives passes it, it goes to the Senate for a trial. So think of this 100 senators almost as like the jury. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is the judge, and they hear all the evidence, and then the jury, which are the senators, decide whether or not to remove the president from office. It has to be with a 2/3 vote. So this has happened 3 times in American history. It happened with Andrew Johnson, it happened with Bill Clinton, and it happened most recently with President Trump. All 3 were impeached, but when it went to the Senate for trial, not one of them got removed from office. Sometimes it can be very political. In the sense of the 3 presidents I mentioned, it was. Where there was a lot of animosity between the president and their political opposition in Congress. We saw that with Andrew Johnson, where he was a Democrat and he really upset the radical Republicans in Congress. And we saw this with Clinton, where now all of them did technically violate some type of crime when they're looking at, or some type of rule. That they were able to use against them, but nothing to the point where they actually got removed from office. All right. So another way, like I was talking about before, where the Supreme Court can step in and uh, have control over the president is with judicial review, where they take a case that has to do with the president and decide whether or not what they're doing is constitutional. And this happened with U.S. versus Nixon. Remember when I talked about executive privilege with Section 2, where the president can claim, well, I'm keeping these documents confidential because of national security. That's what this court case was about, where Nixon had tapes. He actually recorded all of his conversations in the name of using them for a memoir after he quit being president. But the tapes incriminated him to be part of the cover up of the Watergate scandal. Well, he claimed executive privilege. I don't have to send you those tapes. That's confidential. And the Supreme Court said that executive privilege does not reach here. If you're committing a crime, we get to look at this. So basically, they balanced that with the rule of law. He wasn't following the rule of law. So they basically said, you got to turn over those tapes. They can also block executive orders. For instance, they basically were looking at when Obama had an executive order, the one where I talked about before, sorry, I said 5 million, it was 4 million undocumented immigrants were allowed to apply for citizenship legally without getting kicked out of the country. They can do that. And sometimes they uphold executive orders. So they did block that, but they upheld executive orders like but in some way, shape, or form. So like when President Trump, it was known as the Muslim ban, but what was happening is he picked several different countries to ban travel to and from in the name of national security. It was dubbed the Muslim ban because those countries were predominantly Muslim. They upheld that executive order because there wasn't evidence to prove he was doing it because of religion. There was evidence to prove he was doing it because of national security concerns. All right, so looking at all of this, why do you think Congress is often more successful in checking the president's domestic than his foreign affairs? Think about what I talked about in Section 2. And then why do they issue executive orders that might be blocked by the Supreme Court? Remember, executive orders, you don't have to use Congress. It has the same weight as law. Why do they risk doing that if there's a chance it could be blocked in Supreme Court? Think about those things. And when you're working on your FRQ, maybe the answers to those will help that. Other than that, I'm done. Have a good one. I'll see you later.